Welcome to RVRB Roundtable, a weekly show that brings the brightest creative minds and digital producers in sports, entertainment, politics, news, and more to share their stories and strategies that will help you become a better leader and creator. This podcast is hosted by Clark Campbell, the founder and CEO of RVRB Agency, an event media production company where the goal is always to make great events look great online. For many brands, keeping fans' attention and loyalty in 2020 felt like an uphill battle. Not only is your entire audience suffering from Zoom fatigue, but now every event you put on has to battle with everyday distractions like Slack notifications and kids that always seem to need a snack just as you sit down to focus. All things we never really had to think about when we were only doing live events. Today, we are talking to David Brickley, the owner and CEO of STN Digital, all about how you can strategically win back your fans in 2021 using real-life examples from his work with brands like Amazon and the Toronto Raptors. Now on to this week's episode. Here's your host, Clark Campbell.
All right, Will, here we are. First RVRB Roundtable podcast. We're going to make this airplane fly. You want to do it?
We're going to make it fly with the one and only David Brickley.
We are here with David. What's up, David?
It.
We are so honored that you would be here. I'm going to tell you about David in just a second, but here's the deal. Most people and most brands, they have lost the attention and the loyalty of their fans when they were forced to move their events to these virtual platforms. Like, this is a roundtable. This podcast is the RVRB Roundtable, where we're doing it around a virtual roundtable. So some people are getting exhausted and tired of that. We thought we'd bring in an expert that has talked to and worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of brands and influencers around the globe out in sunny, warm California. David Brickley. He's our first guest. He's the owner and the CEO of STN Digital, a social media marketing agency that's literally trusted by some of the largest sports and entertainment brands in the world. He's been there. He's run it. He's owned it for 4 years. He has a podcast.
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
8 years, man.
We're cutting things in half. 8 years.
Yeah,
8 years. A podcast.
Yeah, 8
you can
years
tell us
in
about.
April, so yeah, exactly.
I do want you to tell us a little bit more about STN Digital. So
Yeah.
how about we just jump in? Tell us about STN Digital real quick, David.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, we're a social first marketing agency. We actually got our start. So I'll give you a quick background. I went to school for journalism. I wanted to be, on Sports Center, host my own radio show. I have the haircut for Scott Van Pelt. Figured that might work. But yeah, I went to LA, worked at Fox Sports Radio as a producer for 3.5 years. I wanted to essentially, have my own show, have my own opportunity. So I was hosting podcasts, kind of grinding, writing blogs for a Laker website. And I wanted my own show. And I felt like, in my opinion, my program director wasn't giving me that opportunity quick enough. So I tried to take destiny in my own hands. I started a YouTube channel back in 2011 and just did the show I wanted to do, but on YouTube. So back then there wasn't a lot of like original sports talk happening on YouTube. So we got on the front page, kind of had a little bit of a following. And then I had an idea. I wanted to reach out to my idol at the time, Kobe Bryant, and pitch an idea, which was
good idol,
Kobe
by the way.
Minute. Yeah.
Yep.
Growing up in an hour from LA, you can imagine. So I reached out to him and his team and said, can I make a video for you once a week called the Kobe Minute, talk about your on the court and off the court success, and just let me host it on my YouTube channel and you can post it on your social, et cetera. And he was all game for it. So weekly, I was sending Kobe these videos. It would get like 300,000 views a week because the algorithm was so crazy back then with his social following. And that was the epiphany. I mean, before that, I really didn't have a dream of owning a company or agency. I just wanted to talk about sports and have fun, with my career. But that was really where I was like, wait a second, I can make money. I can help brands, teams, athletes. And that was back in April of 2013 and STN started. So it's just been, to answer your question in a longer way, I guess, it's been a snowball effect where we started with athletes and then started working with colleges and teams. And now, obviously with network streaming partners, you name it. So it's been a really cool evolution from starting with like, let me just try this. Let me just throw this out there. And now 8 years later, it's pretty awesome. So.
What's the problem that your agency solves, David? Like specifically with your clients, what's the problem that you guys solve that's different than everyone else?
I think it's time. I mean, when you look at these big brands, a lot of people they don't have enough people internally. Like, they don't have time for 3.5 hours to whiteboard a digital stunt for one of their 17 shows that's premiering this fall. So I think being able to kind of offload that, allow us to do the homework, kind of roll our sleeves up and allow the the company or the brand to be the editor in chief. So they can be presented with, 11 different ideas and be like, ooh, I love that one. Let's expand on that. And then they're off to their next meeting. So I think really, you can hire stuff internally. You can do stuff internal. But when you're talking about at scale, it's so amazing to be able to offload that and be able to get a second pair of eyes or just a different idea on those different campaigns.
So authority is a really big piece of why we bring on experts like you. Just go ahead, full permission, name drop. We want to know, I mentioned a few. Tell us about some of the brands that you've worked with that you're allowed to talk about. There's probably
of course. We work with Amazon. We work with Warner Media, Fox Sports, NBC Sports. We work with pretty much teams in every major sports league, so NFL, MLB, NBA, et cetera. We just started working with musicians more, so Elton John and then Queen, especially on their TikTok strategy, because music is going viral on TikTok and actually hitting the top Billboard charts. So it's been really cool. Like I said, it started originally in professional sports. I think our first NFL client was the Minnesota Vikings back in 2013. And then that's just, of course, blossomed into entertainment relationships, streaming, product, athletes, musicians, et cetera. So.
Incredible. So that's actually a perfect segue into beginning some of these questions for the podcast. So we've created this podcast for two reasons. Number one, it's because at Reverb, we believe great events should look great online. And there are, the second reason is there are few, if any, learning communities across multiple industries like sports, entertainment, conferences, concerts, and journalism. And we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And that is why we want you here today, David, because you work across multiple industries. Yeah. I have groups that I'm in sports. I have groups that I'm in conferences and just big tech Facebook groups online. I want to bring people together from different industries that can talk about what are the things we can learn from all of these platforms,
right?
From all of these, I guess, experienced guides like you, the experts. So Will has a few questions. We're going to jump back and forth, and we'll just see where this goes. It's the first podcast.
Let's do it. I'm excited. Thanks for the honor of the first one. Let's see if I live up to the hype.
You will.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. So today we're going to be spending some time really looking at sports, I think specifically. We want to look at how they successfully use social media in order to capture fans' attention and, of course, build that brand loyalty that we all know is something that all brands are trying to do, trying to build brand loyalty within their following and try to get them to further engage, which, of course, helps their businesses and their organizations. So with that, do you have any examples of projects that you've worked on or brands that you've been watching that are doing a really good job of this fan engagement right now?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind that we worked on was with the Toronto Raptors on their kind of road to the 2019 NBA championship with Kawhi. It was kind of a perfect mixture of pop culture, highlights, engaging content, and the fact they actually won at the end. So I think there was, 1.43 million followers in 8 weeks, which is pretty insane. But it was just this amazing mixture of, and I really try to hit this home with a lot of our clients and anybody out there, you have to capitalize on your IP and capitalize on your big moments. The Raptors example comes to mind because I think it was a perfect mixture of getting content the fans wanted, making them laugh, hitting pop culture, making sure that we were first to market, or I guess the one-stop shop for all Raptor fans to be able to celebrate and be able to have that, content that they really enjoyed and wanted to share and save and DM their friends on Instagram and things like that. So that was just one example. That was a perfect example of that.
We need to make sure we link that out in the show notes. You'll hear more about that, but we're going to make sure everybody has show notes. We'll get that link in there. One of the things that so many virtual events are lacking, obviously, since the pandemic began, is the live in-person interaction aspect. We're just missing it. It's so powerful when you're fully immersed. I call it 3D, where virtual events are more 1D and 2D. So we as professionals on this side of the screen that's creating content, we have to work 2-3 times harder to get people to kind of feel immersed into the experience.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys just daily too, like on Zoom calls. It's so much more mentally draining than a face-to-face conversation, right? So it's just, you're also battling against just the Zoom fatigue or the inability to just keep people's attention. Because I try my best, but sometimes I get a Slack pop up in the middle of a meeting and it's just difficult to stay locked onto somebody. So I totally agree.
Well, and that sets up a perfect story here very fast. We come from a story brand training background. We're certified story brand guides, and they taught us from the very beginning the brain is constantly burning calories, and if you're not focused on helping the brain survive and thrive, your brain is going to say, I don't need that information, so I'm out. I'm going to go to what's going to help me pay my bills tonight, talk to my wife or my spouse or my kids, my business that I have to develop. If you don't hold people's attention and burn the calories they need to survive, we leave a meeting exhausted. And because our brains are fighting that.
I think one thing too, I don't know where I saw it from, but just like in our industry too, when you're doing decks and presentations, if you write 3 paragraphs or 2 paragraphs next to an example, and I heard a great saying, it's like, do you want me to read what you just put on the slide, or do you want me to listen to what you're saying?
Sure.
And that's where I think it's difficult, because you try to jam everything on maybe a presentation in that regard, but when you're looking at a slide, your brain says, I'm going to start reading this, and now I'm not paying attention to what the person says. But if you want me to pay attention to what you're saying, maybe we should like not have words that you want me to read. So to the psychology of it is interesting, especially virtually. How do you keep people engaged, and how do you make sure that they're on point?
Yeah, well, it's not just the cognitive dissonance on the screen as well. There's also a lot of things going on around us that we're seeing all the time happening that's then pulling the user's attention. Like, we're all at home and whatnot. And so whether it's the dog barking or something, there's so many easier routes to get your attention pulled away, whereas you're actually in person at a live event, you're zoned in.
Well, in a professional setting too, if you're in a meeting, I can see if you're looking at your phone. I can see if you're smiling. I can see if you chuckle. And even on a Zoom call, I'll try to I'll look at the reactions of people's faces as I'm going through a slide, or as one of my teammates are, because those verbal cues, not verbal, I guess those cues that you see, visual cues, are so important to see. Like, am I reading the room correctly? Are they feeling what I'm putting down here, or am I just losing the room? And that's important too.
So we watch you, we follow you. We're big fans of what you do out in California and actually around the country. Literally, I think we see all of your content online. We love it. You're a big influence in my life personally. We saw that you helped Amazon launch their show, The Wilds, with a virtual slumber party. So can you talk about how you made that into a successful interactive experience for that audience?
Yeah, I think what we found, and it makes sense, right? Like, the reason you go out and spend, $17 on a cocktail, maybe with your wife, Clark, is you want to have the vibe, right? You want to have like the fire pit, the rooftop, maybe a little bit of music. You're getting waited on. It creates a different vibe outside of your living room. And I think with these virtual events, that's what we're starting to realize. And it does make sense that with this example for the Wilds, we created a virtual slumber party. So we encourage people to come in your PJs. We're going to do a lot of self-care. We're going to talk about, makeup, nail art. We had a DJ room that you can actually request songs in. We had an AR filter where you can, before the show, a TikTok challenge. It kind of made this event. But again, it had a vibe to it. It kind of felt different. And we've seen a lot of that in virtual too. Can you send a cocktail kit with different gifts that someone can sit down at their table and kind of make the cocktail and sit down and have their laptop or their TV streaming. So with that in particular, it was just kind of like putting these influencers and these different rooms together and these different videos that you can interact with and truly create entertainment that is circled around this show. But again, all these different elements to really make it special, which is, I think, important when you're putting together a virtual event.
That's so cool. Go ahead, Will.
With that, a question I have. So, like, a lot of brands are running into problems where obviously they're putting on events at scale. So it might not be their one token event of the year, but they're putting on several events a month or whatnot in order to fill that gap. What's something that you've taken away from that can be scaled down to those small events? So like, budgetary allowance might not allow for people to obviously send out, let's say, cocktail kits for their, 3 times a month an event. But what did you pull from that event that you did learn that has that trickle down effect?
I think one thing too is making sure that you're engaging with the viewer as well. Like, is there polling? Can you gamify it in any type of way? Make it innovative, make it engaging. That's one part that I think you can make it regardless of your scale. But yeah, I think, and you guys know, in the professional setting, we're just on these Zoom and Hangout calls all day, every day. So if your event looks just like yet another Zoom call, you just kind of check out, right? So how can you make, spruce up a little bit of graphics, a little bit of polling, gamify, get a hashtag going, something that may not break the bank, but it makes you feel different that I'm not going. And I've done it. I've been asked to be at these 4-hour training sessions or 3-hour Zoom calls to talk about whatever. And it's just like we talked about earlier, it's so mentally draining that you kind of have to keep the viewer entertained and keep them engaged. So that would be my recommendation.
We experienced that with several brands last year where we had to go to the drawing board and completely reinvent their programming. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's all about reinventing the programming to keep people engaged or to surprise them.
And we've like really put our foot down on a couple ideas where they wanted one host to host like an hour and a half long virtual stream. Like, guys, like, unless you're Kevin Hart, it's just really difficult. You know,
it's better be Netflix special level in order to keep people engaged.
Like, to keep people engaged for an hour and like not have anybody to banter with and not be able to take a break and kind of go back and forth with. So we always recommend like having two people, even if it's like a moderator, if you're doing some type of watch party or live stream or anything like that, asking one human to carry an hour-long program. It's extremely, so those are even little things that you can say, like, guys, like let's not back ourselves into the corner. Let's at least give ourselves a chance here to keep people engaged by having friendly banter and things like that.
And I think one of the things that's super cool about that is those digital implementations that you're doing. Like you talked about gamifying, and we got to do some of that last year. Those are the things that are copy and paste repeat. Like those aren't really budgetary limitations, because it's like a build it and then implement it time and time again.
Yep, absolutely. And, you know, even like with Zoom's native features, they have, you know, you can upgrade to get those polling features. You can break out in different rooms. Like, all right, guys, we're all going to put you in rooms of 5 and you're going to discuss X, Y, and Z. And let's come back as a group if you're doing more of like e-learning or you're doing more of those conference types as well. So, you know, there's things you could do. And I think if it's going to be like a conference or a seminar, more breaks as well. I mean, people need more breaks from the screen. So maybe every 40 minutes, you give people a 10-minute break to check their phone or use the restroom or what have you. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, all this stuff, and you guys know, it just comes down to like the psychology of the consumer. And what would you like to see? Would you want to sit there with one host watching a 2-hour monologue? No, the answer is no. So how do you continue to keep them entertained?
As you're saying all this, it's confirming in my mind the biggest lesson I learned in 2020 was you have to convince your clients to reprogram, because so many of them are so comfortable doing what they used to do, and they're like, let's modify. And I look back on all the virtual events that we took from an in-person to a virtual event, and the most successful ones, honestly, were the nonprofit events that we said, no, you don't go stand on a stage and have this talk. We right in this room that we're in December, we reprogrammed a virtual event. They tripled their donations from the year before. Tripled. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars increase by reprogramming the experience. And that is the big takeaway from.
And yeah, even like as a fellow business owner in business, and we're in the same space, I think it probably took me a good 6 or 7 years. So this is recent for me, but yeah, I'm starting to challenge our clients a lot more. Like, hey, let me just challenge you to think a little bit differently about this, because I know you brought us on to be the expert. We've done this a lot. I can tell you that I'm really concerned about just having one host trying to carry this thing. Would you be open to maybe thinking about a secondary host or just kind of reprogramming this? And, you know, most people want the event to go well. And if you're the expert and they're bringing you on and they're paying you money for your expertise, like I think a lot of us get, and myself included, I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to act like I know everything. But at the end of the day, at least you have that receipt. So if it does kind of not go that well, it's like, hey, I kind of let you know that yeah,
it's a good point.
Which is important for your credibility and for your authority in the space. Like, hey, I did tell you, unless it's Kevin Hart, it's going to be difficult to carry this 90 minutes. And that's why it kind of fell flat. That's why people, you know, they bailed after 15 minutes. That's what we saw via the data or what have you. So I think that's important.
You think when you're in a main stage, when you're in an arena type environment, like you're not having people bail. People aren't leaving their seats to go to the back of the room. You kind of have them locked in for better or worse. But so many people want to copy and paste that main stage experience, that in-person main stage experience, and basically just like, hey, can we just live stream what we were already going to do?
And you guys know too, in the live stage, and the live stage experience, you know, even again, the psychology of walking back and forth. I mean, comedians use this exact same psychology. But if I'm sitting there and I have to kind of follow with my eyes, I'm already more engaged, and I'm kind of making sure that I pay attention. There's tricks that amazing public speakers use just to make sure that you don't look at your phone or you're looking around the room and kind of zone out. And again, virtually, that's so more difficult. But if I'm polling you or I'm asking questions every 5 minutes, you know, all of a sudden you're like, I need to pay attention. You know,
so good. Oh, I love talking about the psychology of this. It's one of my favorite topics, and not in a manipulative way, but in an effort to be a good communicator,
right?
In an effort just to get something from
And two, like in our industry, there's so much talk, and I don't like hearing this. Like, well, we're the millennials and Gen Z, like we're a short attention span, type of generation now. It's not true. Like, yeah, there is content that I like to absorb in 15-second chunks if it's Instagram stories or TikTok. But I also watch 3.5-hour Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
So if the content is good enough, man, that's just like a 2-camera. You guys know, like that's quick.
Yeah.
But if the content is good, like you're going to stay for it. So the same way that you would watch Seinfeld as a 30-minute sitcom, but you also watch the 3-hour, feature-length film. If the content is good, then it doesn't really matter. There's no magic like, it needs to be 15 minutes or less or 15 seconds or less. So that's a comment.
There's no such thing as too long. There is only too boring.
Too boring.
Something that Donald Miller said to us one time. We were like, what do you think? What do you think about this length? Is it too long? He said, there's no such thing as too long. There's only too boring. But I think with that, the funny thing there is a lot of people have potentially a little bit of an arrogance in their own content. Like they just assume that the content will hold all the weight, and thus like, well, we bolt out this content for an hour-long program, and they just assume that it'll carry people all the way through. But talking about Kevin Hart, like unless it's Kevin Hart and it's going to engage him, Kevin Hart writes this content and goes back and forth and over and over and over again, and for months on end to program it. Not to mention the fact that he also is just an amazing comedian with an amazing personality. Whereas so many people, like, they make a run of show and like that's half of it, like that's the end of it, and they just assume it'll work.
That's why it's good to bring in companies like both of ours, because you get too close to your product and you start to forget. You're in so many meetings and your product inside and out. Like, wait a second, if I bring a person off the street and I sit them down, are they going to know what the hell you're talking about, right? So I think it's important too to be self-aware. Like, well, if I was just a random person scrolling on Instagram, would I want to stop on this and try to take the bias of like it's my company or it's my brand and I love it? Like, we know you love it, but how do you make the person that's just like scrolling aimlessly on their couch stop and be intrigued as well? So.
That's so good. I want to talk about this for maybe on an extended episode one day. I'm gonna because I want to keep going right there. But I'm gonna change directions just a little bit. To something we talked about at the beginning. You actually said STN Digital is a social first agency. So for our audience and people that are watching right now, it's oftentimes so hard to actually define what we do, because we all create videos that can go anywhere. We create photos that can go anywhere. Tell us what social first approach to marketing means. Why is it important? Why has it worked for you? Yeah,
I think that's our quickest lane to the consumer. And you guys see this in sports too, right? Like they're no longer you putting out press releases or are you approaching the podium. Correct. You just put out a tweet. And no example's better than that than when LeBron signed with the Lakers. It was just a clutch sports tweet. LeBron has signed a 4-year deal with the Lakers. That's it. There was no decision special. There was no SI, op-ed, just a tweet. And that's what we are now. So social first is like, let's make sure from a social media perspective, our campaigning, our messaging, our brand, because this is the way that we're going to be presenting ourselves to the world. Now, it's of course, it's really important for a lot of different brands to have the Times Square billboard, to have the actual traditional marketing. But on a day-to-day basis, the way you're going to connect your consumer the most is on your social media feeds, or they're coming to your website, they're checking you out. So it's so vitally important. And you guys, we've been screaming this from the rooftops for 10 years. The only, I think, positive of this whole COVID-19 and 2020 as a whole, I've been saying it's really fast forwarded this digital revolution 5 years into the future. And people that got it, they definitely are going to double down. And the brands that didn't spend time or effort on digital and social, they'll be out of business shortly if they don't take it seriously. I'm sure, Clark, you've seen it too. You guys have seen it too. I've got on calls that people have ghosted us for years, and all of a sudden the CEO wants to hop on a call with me because it's like, oh shit, we got to take this seriously. I talked to the CMO on my podcast over at Jersey Mike's, and he said, thank God that we had a deal with a delivery service. I think it was DoorDash or Grubhub. But that used to be 10% of our revenue. Overnight, it's 90% of our revenue. So if we didn't put in that digital first focus on making our consumer easily to get our goods, we would have been not in a good place. Like, we would have had to shut down franchises and really affect lives and stuff like that. So I think the way we approach it is obviously social first, because that's the way, not only organically, but through paid media, that you can reach your consumer on a daily basis. Now, if you're driving down Santa Monica Boulevard and you see the billboard, that's cool, but that's just a small subset of the demo you're trying to hit. So it's really important to get the social first, and then you can kind of, in our opinion, bolt on the other traditional marketing levers.
I would love to probably save this for later, and it's not a political statement. It's a concern statement. There right now, social first. There seems to be a lot of disruption in social because of the political struggles that are happening right now. Do you see any changes in the future? Is it? I'll tell you what I think really fast to get out of the way. I see people jumping off social and then they're literally back. I've seen left and right people jumping off social and then they're back the next week. So I keep telling our clients that ask me that question, they're coming back. Don't worry. What do you think is going to happen in the future of social?
I mean, this is where your mom, dad, your cousins, your wife, your kids, it's where they are. So, I mean, unless you just want to take yourself out of society and just go into a room and lock the door,
that's right.
And you kind of got to be on it, right? So that's the give and take. I will say from like the political angle of it, we have to remember that we're really the first generation that grew up with this. I don't know about you guys, but like I think I launched my Facebook account the year after high school, so 06. Like that's when I got out of high school. I graduated 05. So they don't have enough data. They don't have enough results to look at and say this is how social media affects our mood, our psychology. Obviously, you look at like young women. If you're 13 years old and your whole life is based around likes and getting comments on Instagram, there's absolutely and you guys I'm sure saw Social Dilemma. We've talked about that a lot at the office. But I do think the same way that I think maybe our parents talked about, don't play video games 9 hours a day. You need to get outside and things like that. There's different things. I think when we are kids, and Clark, I'm sure you're probably already doing this, there's going to be certain guardrails. Like you're not going to get a TikTok account until you're 15 or whatever the new rule is. But
something last night.
To our parents' credit, they didn't know that. They didn't know to tell Clark and I to maybe stay off, different things or things that can maybe be bad for our mental health. And then I think to get more into on the social side and political side, I do think there's going to be a lot more at stake to be able to have just the misinformation and things like that. There's going to have to be just a come to Jesus conversation about how we're going to help that, because that's a concern for sure as well.
We're working with a political campaign right now, and you can't run social ads. And so while we are creating and generating so much content for social, they can't get it out as much as you used to be able to through paid media. And so right now, even that is a struggle for some of our clients. It's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds over the next couple of
And again,
years.
I think it's just so young. Like I said, we're 15 years into this thing when Facebook launched. And then all these other newer platforms are just coming up a few years. So we just, I think once we start looking at the data and really start analyzing what this means, I think we're going to start to have just more, I'm sure, again, going back to psychology, more psychologists telling us what we should do with our young people and making sure that they have the right decisions and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see.
Good. Interesting. That is a whole podcast right there.
Exactly.
We'll take it away.
Yeah.
Man, what's your favorite brand on social? And this can even be a brand that you guys have worked with and interacted with, but what's the brand that you think is standing out the most across the board when it comes to engaging their fans on social?
Good question.
It can be one of your clients if it
can be one of your, and you can go platform specific too, to where you're like, this brand's doing amazing on Twitter, but this brand is killing it over here on Instagram or Facebook.
I think when you look at like Instagram, what Barstool is doing is, I mean, that's just like a case study in itself. But they found a way to tap into the exact demo. They pull no punches. They are who they are. What's interesting about the data on that is I think on average, Barstool's posting about 27 times a day on Instagram. 65% of that content is user-generated content. So I think a lot of people wonder, how the hell am I supposed to post 5 or 10 times a day on Instagram? Well, and you guys have seen this with House of Highlights, Bleacher, Barstool.
I see it every day.
Any I guess media hub that is succeeding right now, SportsCenter implements this strategy. I mean, over half their content is resharing user-generated content. And that just goes, I mean, this has been done in linear too with America's Funniest Home Videos or Ridiculousness. I mean, being able to just recycle the internet or recycle people's home videos back in the day, that just works, right? So, it really is becoming where when you're scrolling on Instagram, you almost don't even know where it's coming from. Is it SportsCenter, Barstool, Bleacher, House of Highlights, or my friend that is posting this piece of content? But if you're entertained with me, I'm going to double tap it. Like, thanks, that was hilarious. I'm going to send it to my friend. I'm going to DM it. So I will say, like, those companies that are starting to get it is like, we have this demo. We want to reach the 33-year-old male or whatever they're trying to reach. And they're saying, this is what a 33-year-old male likes. They like to be entertained. They might like to see people chugging beer. They may like to see whatever. So let's feed them this content and let's really be an aggregator. And I think some people are against that, like the aggregation. But again, this is the history of news in our country, cable news. You're just aggregating news and content. Yeah. Just creating a vehicle for someone to sit back and just enjoy the show. So the aggregation of content for some of these brands like a Barstool, House of Highlights, Bleacher, they've just done an incredible job of amassing huge audiences because they're constantly programming their audience to what their audience enjoys.
So where's that push and pull and that give and take with brands, let's say like Nike, where so much of their advertising efforts is focused into creating this huge, amazing, perfectly well done piece of content? Like they're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars and so much energy into one piece of content versus, other brands that are really more focused on just getting user generated content and then redistributing and spitting it back out. Where's that push and pull?
Yeah, I think, Nike is incredible. I always talk about because they never really sell the product at the end of their commercial.
They sell the brand.
They don't say go to Dick's Sporting Goods for $9,999 for the new LeBron shoe.
You're right.
It's all about the feel of the brand. So Nike can do those macro commercials and really create the vision of their company and what they're all about, and then create micro content that leads up to like, this is who we are, this is what we're all about, inspirational, creating that type of mood for their demo. So I think it is important to have those big like tentpole campaigns for your brand to kind of set the stage of who we are. And then from there, you can kind of just on a daily basis, you're more just kind of like laddering up to that and continuing on that narrative. So
I think that's really good for social managers as well that are working for some of these brands, is that not every content you post has to be that pinnacle piece of content. Like you're saying, not everything that you're distributing has to one up the thing behind it.
Yeah, you can't post 30 times a day and have fire and go viral and things like that. And again, I go back to like, you just look at media and be a historian of media. You look at a television network, they're constantly A/B testing. If we put this show at this slot, or do we like have a lead in, or let's play a movie, or let's move it to a different night. And they're looking at Nielsen ratings, and based on what people are interacting with, they're either canceling shows, they're trying new shows. And that's all that social is you're looking at the data on a monthly basis. Give yourself enough time to kind of have an ability to look back at it. But it's like, wow, our audience is really loving this content, but this stuff is tanking. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm sure you guys have seen it too. The idea in the whiteboard room that I thought was going to be like the best piece of content ever ends up tanking, and we take it out of our slot and try something else new. So if anybody thinks they have the recipe to just, spit out fire 30 times a day, or even like 5 times a day, it really just is a mixture. And, like I said, television networks didn't even figure that out. They were lucky to have 2 or 3 of their programs get good ratings. So
always be learning, man. Always be learning. My favorite quote, I think it's Tom Rath. In times of change, learners will inherit the earth, while the learned remain beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. You have to be learning every day. Data informs our learning.
And I think it's social too. Listen, you have to kind of have a few screws loose and just geek out over constantly evolving and tweaking and adjusting, and you just have to love that. If you want to set it and forget it, you're in the wrong industry. That's right. Great point. It just won't work, right? So people do get frustrated that they have to now here comes TikTok. Holy, what's this Clubhouse? Now I have to worry about this is moving quickly, and you may have to move on and do different things. So it's and Dogface is the perfect example of that viral video. Every music company, every record company is like, holy crap, we can go to number 1 in the country just by getting viral on TikTok. Like, let's make that a priority. And you have to enjoy that. You have to enjoy like, oh my God, there's another lever we can pull now. Let's go start to play in this space.
Hey, producers Tessa and Abby over here, make sure that last section right there, so much content that we can share. Like, just Dave was just dropping some bombs right there. Hey, I'm gonna take this back to events for a second. We ventured into a very important world of creative and user-generated content. Let's come back to events. What advice, David, would you give people if we could peel back the curtain of what you're saying to your clients right now? I'm asking for selfish reasons because I need you to be my mentor and my therapist right now. What advice would you give people? We all need it. That's right. What advice would you give people planning 2021 events, and about how do they win back their fans or re-engage now that there's going to be some events start to trickle back in the third and maybe fourth quarter? What advice are you giving people thinking long term right now?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind. I mean, hopefully you haven't lost your fans. Hopefully you've done things to kind of keep them engaged. I think there's three buckets that we focused on during the craziness that was 2020 and still is to a lot of extent. Three buckets is nostalgic content, escapism, and inspirational. And escapism can be both, make me laugh or just, entertain me. But those are three things that you can consistently do on that evergreen strategy. I think from an event standpoint, what's really cool about what's happening virtually, I've been talking about this a lot this last year, is we've educated a population at scale on how to enter a virtual event. No longer do you have to hope and pray that your client, who is maybe a 54-year-old CEO, is going to be able to log into Zoom. Like, they've figured that out. So the fact that, and that's a big part of it, right? Because virtual events were always an option, but we were always afraid of the consumer buy-in because I don't know how this works. I got to put a name in and the thing is spinning or what have you. Everybody in the freaking America or the world has figured out how to enter a Zoom or how to enter a virtual event. Right. It's pretty self-intuitive now. The same way that our parents know how to scroll on Facebook and comment. That used to be like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. So what's very interesting about that is as we get back into normal events, if you're Coachella, if you're Comic-Con, you can have your tentpole in July or in September, but now you have an opportunity to have 11 virtual events to continue to engage the audience. And those will be cheaper. They'll obviously be more virtual, not big as events in terms of budget, but you're able to now pull that lever. And there's so much opportunity for monetization on that regard and sponsors. And now you have consistent content going out. You also can create micro content from those monthly webinars or what have you, and bring it down for your social. So now that we have this lever in our toolkit, I know we're going to use it all the time with our clients, but now brands can definitely, and even with an apparel brand, they can now do virtual showrooms and get more product in front of more buyers and things like that. So I'm excited because
such good advice.
I'm excited because we didn't do it, and we both of our companies knew that this was an opportunity, but we didn't even worry about, because I mean the user trying to get into virtual and just. But now that we've been forced to do it, it just opens up a whole new lever that we can start pulling. So
the floodgates are open, so now you can't really go back. We've had a few conversations about how now that we're virtual, you're not just going to go back to your main live event and that's the end of it. It's going to be both. You're not just done with in-person events forever, but it's a both and. It's 100% a both and.
And now the in-person, as I didn't go to a lot of music concerts every year, but I'm probably going to go to 9 once this thing opens back up, because I'll be so geared up to go. So once this opens up, people are just going to be guns blazing. They want to be out, see humans, 3D, like you said, Clark. So this would be really important to capitalize on that. And then it's going to kind of taper off a little bit. And it's well, can I still have this event? Can I still have this, opportunity with this brand? So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how you can use both.
I think there's going to be a big surge of financial capital into these in-person events, because so many people are going to, I got to get out. I got to go with my friends somewhere. But I don't want our clients or even our listeners and friends here to think that it's just going to all go in person. I think this is going to be both. You're going to see a lot of money and a lot of resources poured into these in-person events, but do not forget. There's people that will stay home because they can't go to all of them, and they need the experience.
By the way, too, in a business setting, I used to fly to New York all the time. I think I was on 50 flights back in 2019. Jeez. And majority of that was I want to make sure I'm in the room, the technology works, I can give the presentation to some of the older C-suite executives. And now I know that, again, they can log into Zoom and they can see my screen share. Now I feel so much more comfortable. We don't need to fly out there, and that'll be kind of more for more special occasions, but it's not going to be a need. And that's going to change, commercial and business travel probably forever. But the fact that that the other person on the other side is going to be able to engage with your content, it just changes the game to be able to be, so much more nimble on your offering. So.
You have all these events and these summits that have VIP levels in the past. I think the in-person event is basically going to become the VIP level. So it's you still have it. It's still super important and where you want to put a bunch of energy and focus. But the main event is almost still going to be, I think, a lot of these digital.
And I think too will be interesting for us to remember, both of us. We can remind each other, but there's going to be a drop off where people are going to say, I never want to be on a freaking virtual event ever again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been at home looking at my screen. I don't want to see this bull crap. And then people like me are going to go to 9 music concerts in 2021 or whatever, 2022. And then it's going to kind of go back to normal a little bit. And now you're going to be more able to do both. So I think it'd be important for all to remember, like, once that surge happens, don't act like that's going to be forevermore. There's going to be a big surge for in-person, a big surge for, I don't want to look at my freaking phone or my laptop, but then it's going to kind of level out probably 6 to 18 months later, where now you can really see what the consumers are down to go to.
Well, because of time, we're going to ask you one more question.
All right, let's do it.
Literally could keep talking, and we'll talk more.
And by the way, you guys have been very kind. Before you ask that question, very kind to me and our company. You guys do incredible work. I mean, some of the best Instagram story content I've seen in terms of just high quality and using really high powered, videography, but also translated that to social, and being what you guys do a really good job of is being genuine to the platform. So making sure if you cut a video, you guys are making that in 9:16 or vertical or 4:5, and that's things so many people get wrong. So kudos to what you guys are doing too. You guys are
that
doing
means a lot. Make sure we send him a gift card for that. Thank you, David.
You did not pay me to say that, I promise.
We did not. I appreciate that, and we will continue following your story and what you're doing. Will, take us away with one more question, and then we'll wrap.
Man, our last question is not necessarily event focused. So obviously we follow each other. We're following you on social media and whatnot, and you're always sharing what you're consuming, whether it's what you're listening to, whether it's what you're reading. So just personally, what's the thing that you've been consuming lately that's the most recent, like everyone should go read that or everyone should go listen to that?
Atomic Habits. Very easy question. This book, it's incredible. And the good news is I think I implied a lot of those habits or a lot of those teachings. And it's not really rocket science that what he talks about, James Clear. But if you haven't, I mean, I just recommend it for any professional, for anybody that's trying to get better at what they do. I wanted to read more. I would find myself scrolling on TikTok for an hour each day on my couch after work, just kind of vegging out, just kind of mentally draining stuff. And I'm like, if I can scroll on TikTok for an hour, I can pick up a book and read it for an hour. So after reading Atomic Habits, I have my calendar on my refrigerator, and my goal is to read a chapter every night. So and for me, it's the accountability. If I don't want to look at my refrigerator and not see a check mark there, so I'm kind of like tricked myself into reading in a sense because I don't want to fail at my stupid little calendar. But those are little again, little tricks that you can do to get better. So I would say my employees are probably saying, David, that's enough. But I haven't stopped talking about Atomic Habits. So I will get you, rather than a social media account or a virtual event or whatever, I'm going to give you more of your.
I love it. Book. Yeah. You're not just gamifying events, you're gamifying your life. In order
to life hacks. That's what you got to do. So
let's give a couple people that book. We'll give that book away. I keep saying I'm going to download it. I have so many people.
Are you guys more of an Audible or
Audible?
Big Audible person. Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Audible's reading too. Everybody thinks that's not the same, but it counts.
It has filled my heart and my mind in the last couple of years. David Brakely, STN Digital, sunny San Diego, California. Yeah, we are so jealous that
once things open back up, come on out anytime.
We will. I want to come back to social media marketing world out there, and
that's right. Yep,
it's usually in San Diego. We love it. Hey, thank you for your time, and thank your team for helping us coordinate this. We are beyond honored that you were on the first.
I'm honored too, man. Number one.
Thank
you. So they number one. If you guys get past 3 podcasts, you're like rarefied air. 95% of podcasts stop.
Challenge accepted.
Every human says they want to start a podcast, but you actually have to work. You have to book the guests. You have to plan. And it doesn't get as fun anymore.
Well, but speaking of planning, we have some incredible guests coming up, and I don't want to give you all of them, but one is our friend Craig Tello, who used to be at WWE and is now at EA Sports in New York. We can't wait to have him. We can't wait to have some of the other guests that you'll hear about soon. Thank you so much, David.
Of course, guys.
STN Digital. We'll see you out there on social.
Have a good week.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on RVRB Roundtable. I really hope that you found something in this episode that was worth taking note of. And that kind of brings me to a special thing that we all are doing, is we are going to be providing show notes for every single episode. If you're anything like me, then you are probably driving while you're listening to this episode, which means that you probably shouldn't be taking notes. If you are, you should stop, because we are going to be giving you show notes for every single episode. All you need to do to get those show notes is to go to rvrb.cc/podcast and subscribe to our email list. It'll just show up in your inbox every single week, and you will never have to worry about remembering something from an episode ever again. And just a little secret about this, sometimes we hide free resources in our show notes, so you are definitely going to want to get in on this. Again, that link is rvrb.cc/podcast. Thank you so much again for being here. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss our next episode, and we will see you next week.